We all think Halloween is about haunted houses and fake monsters. But what happens when the spookiest night of the year is the one night the real monsters decide to come out and play? It's me, Blair, your companion in these quiet hours. There's a certain magic to the darkness, isn't there? It's where the best stories and the worst fears come to life. And tonight, I have a few stories that were sent to me, stories that blur that very line. Our first story comes from a man who calls himself Luigi, and it starts on a perfect Halloween night. The year was 2007. He and 3 of his best friends were high school freshmen, and they had the perfect group costume. He was Luigi, and with him were Mario, Wario, and Waluigi. 4 friends walking through the crisp autumn air of a suburban neighborhood, their pillow sacks still mostly empty, their spirits high. It was getting late. Porch lights were winking out one by one, but they were determined. This was the mission: fill the sacks. They walk up to a house, and their hearts sink a little. The candy bucket on the porch is empty. Just as they turn to leave, a voice calls out from the doorway, "Hey, come back!" An older man stood there smiling. He told them he had plenty more candy. They just had to come inside. The narrator, Luigi, felt a strange, cold prickle on his neck, a feeling that something was deeply wrong. His friends, however, just saw candy. They started to move toward the door. "No," Luigi said, grabbing his friend's arm. "We can just wait out here." The man's smile didn't fade, but it didn't feel friendly anymore. He insisted, "Just come inside for a minute." That insistence is what made Luigi's blood run cold. He pulled his friends away, making excuses, and they started walking down the street, away from that house, away from that smile. The man insisted they come inside. The narrator refused. What would you have done in this situation? Let me know in the comments. They tried to shake it off. Just a weird guy, right? They continued their walk, the neighborhood street now bordering a dark, dense nature preserve. The woods were a wall of black, and from that blackness they heard a sound, a crunching of leaves. Someone was walking in there. When they stopped, the foot stopped. When they started walking again, the footsteps started again, keeping pace with them, just inside the tree line, hidden by the dark. It was probably just a raccoon, they told each other. It had to be. Their logical brains were fighting a losing battle against the primal fear rising in their chests. Then, a single twig snaps, loud, close, and the illusion shatters. That was not an animal. That sound was a signal. It was the starting pistol for a race they didn't know they were in. Their fight or flight instinct chose for them. They ran, all 4 of them sprinting down the dark, empty street. And behind them, the sound from the woods exploded. It wasn't one set of footsteps anymore. It was 2, maybe 3, crashing through the underbrush, no longer trying to be stealthy. The crashing of leaves was frantic. The heavy, guttural breathing was audible over their own panicked gasps. The sounds were getting closer. They were being hunted. The darkness wasn't empty. It was full of predators, and they were the prey. Panic is a fire. It consumes all thought except one: escape. And there, up ahead, was a light, a house. Jesse's house, Wario's house. They didn't even try the front door. They bolted around back, fumbled with the gate, and burst through his back door into the kitchen, slamming it shut behind them, their lungs burning, their bodies shaking. Panic is a fire. It consumes all thought except one: escape. And there, up ahead, was a light. Jesse's house, Wario's house. They didn't even try the front door. They bolted around back, fumbled with the gate, and burst through his back door into the kitchen, slamming it shut behind them, their lungs burning, their bodies shaking. They peeked through the blinds. The street was empty. The woods were silent. Nothing, just the wind and the darkness. For a few minutes, they just stood there, catching their breath, the adrenaline slowly starting to fade. They were safe. It was over. Just as their heart rates began to settle, slam! The backyard gate. It slammed shut with a deafening crack. They froze. Someone was in the yard. Then, from the back door they had just come through, a click and a soft bang, like someone testing the handle. They weren't safe. The hunters had followed them. Panic again, but this time it was caged. Trapped. Jesse grabbed 2 knives from the kitchen block and handed one to Luigi. They crept to the door, ready for a fight they knew they couldn't win. They waited. Silence. After what felt like an eternity, Jesse slowly opened the door. Nothing. The yard was empty. Suddenly, the front door of the house swung open. All 4 of them screamed, a raw, terrified sound. Standing in the doorway were 2 figures. Their screams died in their throats. It was just Jesse's mum and his sisters coming home. They looked confused, wondering why 4 boys in Mario costumes were standing in their kitchen, armed with knives. Relief washed over them in a wave so powerful it almost brought them to their knees. It was a misunderstanding, a prank. Their minds had been playing tricks on them in the dark. It was all just a Halloween scare. They went home. They went to bed. The fear faded into the memory of a silly, overblown story until 12:30 a.m. The narrator's phone buzzed on his nightstand, a text from Jesse, 3 words that turned his blood to ice. It wasn't my mum. His heart stopped. He texted back, "What?" The reply came instantly. "My mum and sisters just got home. They never went into the backyard. The person who slammed the gate, the person who tried the back door, was someone else. Someone else was in the yard with them. They just hadn't been seen." The chill from that message, it's the kind that sticks with you. The realization that the monster got inside the walls and you were just lucky. But sometimes the monster doesn't even bother with subtlety. Sometimes it just pulls up right beside you on the street. Our second story is about that. It comes from a man who was 18 at the time, chaperoning his little brother and his friends on Halloween. It was a normal night until a white van pulled up beside them. The driver, a man in his 40s, leaned out. He looked stressed. He said his passenger seat was broken, stuck in a weird position, and he couldn't fix it alone. He said it was a two-person job. He asked the narrator if he could just help for a second, just to hold a piece in place while he fixed it. The narrator was a good kid. He wanted to help. He told the kids to stay on the sidewalk just for a second, and he leaned into the van. He was focused on the seat mechanism, this mundane piece of metal and plastic. The man was explaining what to do, his voice calm, normal. And in that moment of distraction, he heard it. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a razor, a scream. One of the kids, his head snapped up. The world, which had been wide and open, narrowed into a single, terrifying tunnel. Through the passenger window, he saw him. A second man, who had gotten out of the sliding door on the other side of the van, had his little brother's friend by the arm and was trying to drag him toward the open door. The kids were screaming, backing away, frozen in terror. There was no thought, there was only fire. He lunged out of the van and slammed into the second man. It wasn't a clean fight. It was a desperate, ugly scramble on the cold pavement. He tasted metal and fear in his mouth. His elbow scraped raw on the concrete. All he could hear were the kids screaming his name and the guttural grunts of the man he was fighting. He was losing. The man was stronger. Then a new sound. A porch light flickered on. A door opened. An old man stood on his porch, silhouetted, and he was holding a rifle. He didn't shout, he just raised it. And the world was split apart by the deafening blast of a warning shot fired into the air. The two men from the van didn't hesitate. They scrambled back into their vehicle, tires squealing as they peeled out and vanished into the night. Shaking, bleeding, the narrator gathered the terrified kids. The neighbor stayed with them until the police came. They gave their statements. They went home. But it wasn't over. The next morning, his mum was watching the news. He walked into the living room and he saw it. A school picture of a 9-year-old boy. A boy from a town just a few miles away. A boy who had gone missing last night on Halloween. A cold, sickening wave washed over him. He knew. He knew with a certainty that settled in his bones like a disease. It was them. It was the same van, the same men. They had failed with him, so they had just driven a few miles down the road and tried again. And this time, there was no neighbor with a rifle. That's a story of calculated human evil. But some encounters, they don't feel human at all. They feel like something else entirely. playing by a different set of rules. This final story takes us to the rural back roads of Pennsylvania. Walking down foresty roads, huge gaps of pure darkness between the few houses. Our narrator says it felt less like a party and more like the perfect place for a horror movie. He was with 3 friends, and they found a house that was, for lack of a better word, creepy. It was set way back from the road, with flickering torches lighting the driveway. A sign near the front door had a bucket of candy, but it was empty. The sign read, "If there is no more candy, enter the back at your own risk for more." Against their better judgment, they went. In the backyard, another sign was nailed to the back door with a riddle on it. The riddle led them to a single, solitary torch staked into the middle of the yard. There was nothing there, just a torch burning in the dark. As his friends searched the ground, the narrator felt it again, that cold prickle, the feeling of being watched. He scanned the dark house and saw it. A face in an upstairs window, illuminated for just a second by the flickering torchlight, before pulling back into the shadows. His blood went cold. He told his friends they needed to leave now. As he turned, he saw something else. Movement by a dilapidated shed at the edge of the property. Someone was peeking around the corner. They weren't alone. This wasn't a game. It was a trap. And then the trap was sprung. A figure emerged from the woods behind the shed. He was wearing a horrific mask, something pale and featureless, and in his hand he was holding a machete. He didn't walk, he charged. Right at one of the narrator's friends. He raised the machete and swung it down in a vicious arc. The friend dove to the side, the blade missing him by inches, sinking into the soft earth where he'd been standing a second before. They screamed and ran for their lives, not looking back. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road. They called the police. They were terrified, but also vindicated. They were going to catch these people. When the police car arrived, they led the officer back to the house, but everything was gone. The torches were gone. The notes were gone. The candy bucket was gone. The house was dark, silent, like it had been all along. The narrator frantically told the officer what happened, the riddle, the figures, the man with the machete. The officer listened, his face patient. Then he went to run the address. When he came back to the boys, his face was pale. The pacing of the story slows here. Imagine standing in the cold, your breath fogging in the air, staring at that dark, silent house. The officer walked up to them, his flashlight beam dancing across their frightened faces, and he told them the truth. The house, it had been vacant for months. The family had moved out in the summer. No one lived there. No one was supposed to be there. Who were they? Where did the torches go? How do you set up such a detailed, deadly game in an abandoned house and then vanish without a trace, like smoke in the wind? They never found out. There's a reason these stories stay with us. They remind us that the world isn't always safe, that innocence is fragile. The man from the van story, he ends his submission with this: I know for the rest of my life it will kill me remembering how I could have prevented a kidnapping. And the narrator from that final, impossible story in Pennsylvania, he says, maybe you don't realize how sick this world is, full of insane, scary, messed up people, until you actually come into encounter with them. Sometimes the scariest part of Halloween isn't the costumes or the decorations. It's the moment you realize the monster standing in front of you is real. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, let me know with a like. My purpose here in this quiet space is to keep sharing these true encounters from the dark. To make sure you're here for the next one, hit that subscribe button. Because stories this real, sometimes they disappear.